Welcome to Flute Day. This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. I teach university level Alexander Technique here at the University of Denver's Lamont School of Music. And I'm going to be starting a series, kind of traveling roughly down orchestral score order, of tips for different instrumental musicians. Conveniently, top of the orchestral score order happens to be my instrument, so why not start here with one of the few that I actually have access to and can show you on a real instrument. Why do I give the suggestions that I do? And what are the common factors and parallels between every other video that I've ever made on this channel and this thing? Why does it matter? So, one of the interesting things about this particular instrument is it is the most asymmetrical instrument in existence. It's absurd. It's played so far off to the side that I cannot see my own hands while playing at the same time. There's no amount of looking sideways that's going to make me magically be able to see what I'm doing, as opposed to a reasonable instrument like a piano, or even a lot of the ones that are played this way. I can kind of look down and sort of see what's going on at least a little bit. Not this one. Among the other silly things about this instrument is only about half my air gets used, which means that the amount of air it takes to play this is comparable to a tuba. And yet, a lot of flute players are not large people. If you imagine if you're like a middle school band director and you're handing out the instruments, who do you hand the really large instruments to? The kid who can lift it, right? So a lot of your larger folks, the larger kids, when we start playing a lot of these instruments, who are going to be able to actually have more lung capacity because there is simply a higher number of liters of air in their lungs, they're not playing this. This is often given to smaller people. And that's a challenge. So we need to think about breath. We need to think about efficiency. We need to think about ease when we're talking about flute stuff. Let's do a quick comparison here. I would like you to practice your powers of observation. I'm going to lift this instrument into a playing position in two different ways. And I would like you to see what you notice, then we're going to talk about it. So here's method number 1. All right, I'll let that go. Here's method number 2. What do you see? What's different? Now I'm going to go back and forth between the two so you can really see. I am shuffling my feet, but that's only because I want to stay forward. If I leave my feet alone, here's the difference. Flute is played slightly spiraled to the left. The reason for that is if you don't, it hurts. To be able to take especially my right arm, to have my hand at the same forward-backward level as my mouth, which is what this would require, I have to have my hand way back here. I can't do that for 5 minutes, much less a 3-hour rehearsal. No way. If we look at the other arm, to be able to take this hand all the way across without really crunching and compressing in on the side of my shoulder, my upper chest, I don't really want to take it all the way back directly to the side of my mouth. That's what would be required. This is a lot of tension in my shoulders and my upper chest. And as we talked about, this thing takes a lot of air. I need as little tension as possible around my ribs so that my whole rib cage is free to move and isn't being impeded by the fact that this stupid thing is played sideways. So, a lot of the time when you watch professional flute players who have been doing this for many, many years, they do not play with their feet parallel to each other. They play in some variation on a very tiny lunge. Notice this is exactly the same lunge that we talked about last week in looking at how do we get instruments out of the case. If you haven't watched that one, please go check it out because it's absolutely relevant to winds in particular. I'm allowed to move from here. Music happens to be an expressive activity. I would like to be able to move, please. How can I move while playing in a way that's helpful? Well, it should not be by screwing up my air column because I need that. Anytime you bend your spine, you're messing with your air column, just by definition. So I'm going to not do that. How can I do something like cue a start or an end in an ensemble situation without doing this and messing with my air? It's a tiny rotation just in my arms. And if I need to lean forward, it's from my legs. Legs are so important to playing wind instruments, and they are so under-discussed. So in my class here at Lamont, I make my students address all of this fundamental stuff first before they're allowed to bring in their instruments and start playing. Because the second I actually put the instruments in their hands, they're going to go right back to how they habitually do it. And so I make them spend generally 6 weeks with weekly lessons working on all this fundamental stuff, one-on-one in person. And then week 7 is usually when you would bring in the instrument. The week 7 lesson is generally just getting the instrument out of the case and picking it up, and maybe we'll play some long tones. The week after that, we actually get a little bit more towards playing. So that just gives you some context on, like, this really takes a lot of practice. So when we're dealing with a flute, or piccolo, bass flute, alto, whatever version you've got, this one's a vanilla, we need to spend as little effort as possible in our shoulders and in our legs. So this is where we can practice. Move this thing around. Make sure you've got some space. As you can see, I was just looking at, like, let's not hit this. Make sure you have some space. And practice just moving this thing around, not in your habitual way. How often do you move your instrument around without engaging in your typical habits of playing the thing? This helps to kind of rewire and reprogram a little bit. What are my possibilities with this thing? And if I'm going to be standing in a really consistent position for long periods of time, in my mini lunge here, almost always to the left, can I minimize? Minimizing effort. Think about it as finding bare minimum. What is the lowest amount of effort I can put into lifting this thing? I can take a second, check back in with myself, and as I lift the instrument, take another breath and pause and let go of my collarbone area. Letting that breathe, letting it move is really helpful. The other end of a lot of the muscle attachments in this area compared to my shoulders is my ribs. So I tend to have people work a lot with being able to breathe. Let your ribs move, especially your upper ribs, very relevant for flutes in particular. The upper ribs have got to be able to move. And it's also helpful for letting go of the shoulders because that's the other end of a lot of those muscles. So once I've gotten here and I'm in playing position, I'm going to still look around for a minute. I'm going to still think about what it is that I'm working with, my use of myself. The world's most expensive kazoo does not get to be in charge of me. I'm in charge and I'm deciding what I'm doing. If I want to completely hold still, I can, and I'm going to do that by still thinking, softening in my knees, allowing this easy, soft unit from the bottom of my pelvis all the way up to my head to have its own integration. And when I take a breath, my belly is allowed to move. That is a hard one for a lot of wind players, but it's important because mechanically, when the diaphragm goes up and down, it needs somewhere to go. You have a squishy bag of organs here. When the diaphragm goes down, the sides go out. That's my inhale. When I breathe in, my squishy bag of organs needs somewhere to go. Can't go backwards because there's a spine there. Can't go sideways because there's ribs. Has to go out. That's an inhale. And you'll actually get more air doing that than just trying to pull one of these, which involves sucking the belly in and requiring myself to kind of tilt in my spine, right? Here's that movement to attempt to lift my sternum, which you'll see a lot of people try to do. It's performative breath. It's not actually getting you any more air, I promise. Allowing my belly to move, and first of all, giving myself permission. The belly's allowed to take up space. It's allowed to be there. And I don't have to constantly try to hold it in. Ye tiny petite flute player, no! I need those. Those are my organs. I'm allowed to have a belly. And when I breathe in, I will get more air if I have let go of my belly. So here we are. We've managed it. And I can take my time on my first breath. I don't necessarily have to just do go, right? That gasp, it can help you kind of get into the mental mood of what you're doing, but if you've got the time to take a nice, slow, consistent, free breath, take the time. Conductor can wave around all they want. And then we go. I've taken my breath beforehand. Okay, here we are. We played a note. And when I breathe again, I'm still coming back to letting go of my shoulders. Asking my belly to be soft. Asking my knees to be soft. So, thinking about flute stuff. In summary, we've hit a couple different points here. We've talked about spiral. We've talked about lifting an instrument. Even if I'm sitting, all the same stuff still absolutely applies. I'm going to rotate my chair. Ideally, I would like a straight line between my nose, my music, and my conductor, because then I can just use my eyeballs to flick back and forth between the two. So I would have my music here, not here where my pelvis is facing, right? If I were to shine a flashlight from my belly button, it's over there. That's not where I put my music. My music goes here. Because this is where I actually need to look so that I'm not asking my shoulders to constantly have to try to pull this stupid thing back sideways. It works. It's the exact same relationship as being vertical and fully standing, right? I've still got the support underneath, and I'm going to let go of my legs. I'll have better breath support that way. So letting go, doing less, taking time is rather antithetical to how we're often taught to play a flute. But it's important. And when I work with flute players in here, I make them practice taking time. So even though this instrument is the epitome of drama and exciting lines and high, fast stuff, you're not a flute, you're a person. You still need to do human things. That includes letting go of the shoulders, letting go of the legs, allowing the belly to take up space, and taking a second to just enjoy. How pretty it is. Finding those moments of good things is really important. So, ye flute players, and anyone who works with flutes or just is interested in flute stuff, I encourage you, find your moment to breathe. Find your moment to let go of your jaw. Find your moment to appreciate. It's pretty. And that joy turns into a better sound.